Alright, hi everybody, it's Jens, also known online as I'm out to get you on Magic Online, and here is my Goblins deck. I want to review a couple of the games because I think the deck has a lot of potential on Pioneer, and as kind of the main brewer, this deck came up with the concept. I feel like it still has a lot of potential that's not tapped into, but I'm getting more and more frustrated whenever people try this deck. They can't get results with it because they don't understand how the deck is played, so I want to get some of that information out there because it has a couple of counterintuitive things. First off, we're in red and green, running full set of stomps, Copperline, Gorgeous Fastlands, and some Carcolusine Forest just because we have a heavily green sideboard. And then everything else is all about Goblin synergies. We run 34 creatures, all of them are goblins, and we have 4 spells here. If you haven't seen Breakout before, it looks at the top 6 cards, gets you a mana value 2 or less creature, puts into the play, or if it's larger than that, you can choose to put it into your hand, and it gives it haste. So essentially another 4 copies of the creatures, which is great because our deck really plays quickly and efficiently, and the curve tops out at 2 because it's an aggro deck looking to kill the opponent on turn 4. Failing that though, there's a combo blackout plan using Conspicuous Snoop, Runvelt Hordemaster, and Skirk Prospector, which is a little bit difficult to stack the triggers in the most effective manner, which is why I've kind of selected the matches that I have today. So I'm just going to go through my last league with this to see, well, to show you how things play out. Just because I hope that people are going to get a sense of how to play this deck effectively. So, first things first, I opt to take the mulligan. If you don't have 2 red sources and you don't have more than 1 2-drop, it's usually a good thing to mulligan. You want to have a good max of creatures, and at least 2 red sources of lands. We end up putting the Fast Goblin underneath. We have a Foundry Street Denizen here, so we're going to play that on our first turn. And follow that up with one of our 2-drops. It looks like our opponent, based on this, is on Yorion, so they're going to be a bit bigger. First thing they do is burn down our Cragcrown Pathway. That's okay, because we run 3 basic mountains, so we're not going to get blown out on lands. We have 2 Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, just because this deck loves to have some burst mana. We follow up with a Battlecry Goblin, which is a fantastic 2-drop because we're a little bit worried about removal. We can get our Conspicuous Snoop in next turn, and barring that, either get Breakout or do something else. Alright, our opponent is on some kind of value plan. They got a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. It would be really nice to have a Legion Loyalist there because it prevents tokens from blocking, so sad that we put that at the bottom at the beginning of the game, but we continue on. We're going to break out to try to find something off the top. We get our Legion Loyalist. That's fantastic. We have our Foundry Street Denizen, which is going to pump up on cast because another goblin enters. And now we can attack with all of these. And we end up having 6 power, which gets us another Battlecry Goblin trigger. Now, important thing, always put your Legion Loyalist trigger first on the stack so that it resolves last. That way your Battlecry Goblin token can also not be blocked by token and will have First Strike and Trample. That way, none of these get blocked by the Goblin Shaman token. You get it for free. Alright, they look like they're going to have 5 mana after attacks. It's Yorion. They might be on the it's not Cascade combo, but right now they're just blowing up my lands. Not really sure what's going on here. They attack into me for another mana. See if they have anything else. Lightning Helix takes out my Battlecry Goblin. That could be bad because I don't have anywhere to dump anything, but I do have the 2 Foundry Street Denizens. I have a conspicuous Snoop in hand. This lets me recycle some of my mana. If I have Snoop on board, I can see the top card of my deck. But right now, we turn all 4 of that into red mana using our Nykthos, because after we have the Skirk Prospector down, we get more. Conspicuous Snoop lets you see the top card of your deck and cast it. If they're goblins, he also gains activate abilities of all goblins off the top of your deck. But we see another Skirk Prospector, and in fact another Legion Loyalist, so we have more than lethal damage again on turn 4, and we can rumble in for the win. That takes us to match 2. Game 2. Alright. Taking a look at the replay here. It's going to be a little bit different. First off, I'll take a look at our sideboard. So, at the beginning of the video you saw that we have 3 Masked Vandals in our sideboard, so those have come into the deck, and I've taken out the 3 Reckless Lackeys, just because these guys are First Strike and Haste. They're more defensive of a card, because they get you a draw and a treasure token in the late game. There's other goblins that you can play in their slot, so they're kind of the first ones that I choose to cut. Didn't really see anything else from them. But Masked Vandal is an absolute powerhouse against any deck that's going to be playing Fable of the Mirror Breaker, so we absolutely want to have them in there. First hand, we have a run drop and a series of 2 drops. We don't have 2 red mana, but we have green here. I think I remember here is I kept, usually this isn't a keep, but we have so many strong 2 drops in this hand that we can really survive without that second pip of red mana. It'd be a little bit awkward if we don't get one soon, but we are on the draw, so it's less likely that we're going to get punished for it. So we're going to start out with Foundry Street Denizen here. Always a great first play, either that or Skirk Prospector are very high up on the turn 1 plays, just because they give you so much. I mean, when you know the matchup, it can be a little bit different. We get Stomping Grounds off their Cleansing Wildfire. They're still on their plan to punish people. We don't have any forests, so we could be in trouble there, because the Masked Vandal's not castable, it's dead in our hand. Get a Battlecry Goblin out. Now, in terms of sequencing, why do I do Battlecry Goblin here instead of a Renvelt Hordemaster? Because that would deal 3 damage on that turn instead of 4. Well, if we have a Battlecry Goblin out, and we don't play any more lands, Renvelt entering next turn is going to boost the Foundry Street Denizen up to 3, because the enter ability as well as the +1/+1, and then the Battlecry Goblin gets 3 as well. So, without anything, we have the 6 power that lets us get another 1/1 red Goblin token on the attacks when Battlecry Goblin gets their attack trigger. That's going to resolve as 2/2 if we have a Renvelt Hordemaster on the board. Instead, they put down a Portable Hole. That's fine, and a High Noon, limiting us to 1 spell each turn. Now, usually that's why Masked Vandals are good, but we can't cast it. We don't have a creature in the graveyard, which is the other thing the Masked Vandal needs. Usually, between Skirk Prospector and your opponent's removal or trading for creatures, that's not really a problem. In this case, we don't really have anywhere to go. So I put down another Battlecry Goblin. I'm going to go back to the same plan, resolve a Renvelt Hordemaster next turn, if everything remains the same. My opponent's on 4 lands. I have another Demolition Field out. At this point, I was a little bit worried. I put down the Timbercrown Pathway to give me access to green. Not sure if that would bait out their Demolition Field, but here they go. I get the extra token. They put down the Wandering Emperor afterwards and use that to gain some life, and then get a Samurai token. It's okay to run into something like that. Sometimes, when you have your Battlecry Goblin, your opponent will be lazy, and they will -2 to exile your tapped creature before the Battlecry Goblin token has been created. At that point, because their Planeswalker is on the board, you can have that token attack them. So, in terms of sequencing, when you're playing against the Goblins deck, that's a pretty big misplay, because then you can take out the Planeswalker right away, because you have a new attacker coming in that can hit them directly. So always remember that that's an option if your opponent slips up. A little bit bad to have dead mana on board. We could have cast the Fireblade Charger if we'd flipped it onto red. Instead we choose not to. We still don't have a creature in the graveyard, so that means Masked Vandal isn't going to be able to do anything, which means I want to rumble in with these guys so that I get something into the graveyard to trade for the Masked Vandal. And in that case, we're actually going to get our choice because our opponent has open mana, get the Wandering Emperor. Now, importantly, I have 2 Renfelt Hordemasters on board. That means I get 2 triggers off of there. Get a Cacophony Scamp and a Legion Loyalist off the top. This is massive card advantage, and it can start paying off hugely later down the line. Opponent untaps. Exile a tapped creature, gain some life. They just want to pick off my board. My Hordemasters are feeling relatively safe right now. I can always opt to take some damage. They're only at 9 health. I'm at 15. I'm massively ahead there. They have a ton of lands. I have relatively few, but now I have my creature in the graveyard, so I can get that Masked Vandal to blow up their High Noon. They decide to blow up the High Noon by themselves, exiling another 2 off the top. Now, sequencing-wise, I know I only have the mana for 1-drop, but you always cast the creatures that you exiled the turn earlier, like the Legion Loyalist and the Cacophony Scamp early, so that you can't get them lost. I choose the Cacophony Scamp here because it lets you deal damage to something on death, at the death trigger, instead of the Legion Loyalist, which would let me just get through the tokens forever. I don't want to attack this turn. I want to have some damage spread around because the opponent's at such low health. I don't feel like the Legion Loyalist is really worth it. They decide to get me another mountain. They don't have anything else to spend their mana on. So they blow up my green source, but it's already too late. I have my Masked Vandal out. 4 mana. And I have a Conspicuous Soup and another Renfelt Hordemaster. It's pretty difficult to lose when you see all 4 of your Hordemasters in a game. That's what I mean. This deck really revolves around the 2-drops. The 2-drops are very strong. First thing I do is get a Conspicuous Snoop off the top. I did something interesting here. Alright, so I activate my Nykthos for red to get 4 red. And cast the Scourge Prospector while sacrificing the Charger. The Charger went to their dome. I'm not really that concerned about that. I have 2 Renfelt Hordemasters in play. I have a bunch of 1-drops in my hand. I have all these Fireblade Chargers. These are going to come onto the battlefield as 3/3s. The Fireblade Chargers, as well as Cacophony Scamps, deal damage on death to equal to their power to any target because they get pumped by the Renfelt Hordemasters, giving +1/+1 to all your goblins. That means that I have 9 damage, and I only need to find a 10th one to get on there. Every time a creature of mine dies, I dig 2 deeper, and every time I sacrifice a goblin, I get 1 red. So even though they used a second Lightning Helix while I had my Scourge Prospector on the stack and could not respond to it, so that they killed my Conspicuous Snoop, I really have 3 cantrips here, 9 damage. And each one of these digs 2 cards down, so I can go 6 cards down. Any other 1-drops that I find count as cantrips because I have the 2 Renfelt Hordemasters, so I can sacrifice them for mana again. And because I can do that, I can keep on digging and digging and digging deeper down into my deck until I find another Fireblade Charger or Cacophony Scamp to finish out the game. So that's just what I do. I use the cards in my hand, I find another Cacophony Scamp off the exile, and that's the end of the game because I have 12 direct damage on them right now, and there's nothing that they can do about it. Even though we were relatively slow, we kinda got stuck on mana, we managed to get out of this control system. Now, Boros, I don't know about the current meta, if this is a typical deck, but through removal, through life gain, you have a very versatile game plan. Once you start to pop off, there's not really a lot that your opponents can do, and you can also accrue a lot of card advantage, either through Conspicuous Snoop, getting you extra goblins off the top, or Renvelt Hordemaster, which can set you up to play through board wipes and stuff like that, because you always get your goblins in exile that you can cast. So, first match, nice 2-0. Second match, let's see game 1. Alright, our opponent doesn't have anything to declare off the front. We ended up with a pretty nice hand. We've got some 1-drops and 2 Renvelt Hordemasters. If you have 2 2-drops, it's usually a keep as long as you have 2 lands, which are both red sources. This one has 3. This is almost ideal. The first thing we want to do is play the Foundry Street Denizen. We're on the play, so that's nice. Alternatively, if our opponent was on the play and they showed that they were playing mono green, we want the Cacophony Scamp out first, because when this attacks, you get a chance to blow up one of their 1-mana elves on turn 2, so they don't get the 3-mana turn 2 turn that is typical of the mono green list. Why was I thinking about mono green? Well, because look at this, Bossy June, Nykthos. They're playing mono green. So, I'm just going to play at my Cacophony Scamp, I'm going to play at my Renvelt Hordemaster. I'm not really worried about board wipes or removal. These are just going to get absolutely massive. They have stumbled, and so they can see that the writing's on the wall. Regardless of anything, I should have lethal damage when my Cacophony Scamp rumbles in next turn, even if it dies. You know, this is already 7 damage, it hasn't been applied. I have more than 10, easily more than 10, and if I pick up something like a Nykthos, I could even activate my Den of the Bugbear on turn 4 and rumble in with it. So, they call it quits there. Game 2 of our second match. Let's have a look. Now, because I'm worried about elves, I want to see, in this build, I don't have any direct damage that isn't off of a death trigger. So I want a Skirk Prospector and a Cacophony Scamper Fireblade Charger, just so that I can remove the turn 1 elf on my turn 2. Alternatively, if there's a lot of mono green in the format or things like that, you can also play an alternate list using Firebrand Archers. Sorry, Fanatical Firebrand, not Firebrand Archers. Just because their ability to deal with a turn 1 elf when you're on the draw or the play is really underrated. They sacrifice themselves, so they act as a auto cantrip without needing Skirk Prospector and do a little bit of direct damage. The problem is, against other decks with big creatures, the mono red and prowess and other stuff like that, they can be a little bit too slow, which is why in my current list I have something that's a little bit more versatile with the Reckless Lackey and also 1 fewer Foundry Street Denizen, just to make up for it. So let's have a look at that opening hand. We do have a Reckless Lackey, we don't have anything to deal with turn 1 elf, but we have a nice mix, double red, we have Nykthos, and 1 of each of our 2 drops, which is fantastic. Our opponent shows us 2 ley lines of the Guild Pact and a forest. No, they probably are going off the Nykthos plan. They don't know that we're going off the Nykthos plan too, so we drop a Reckless Lackey, we rumble in for 1. Their turn, they still don't have a play, and that means that they're going to have something massive next turn. We see a Skirk Prospector off the top. Now, they're stuck on 2 mana. We have a Nykthos with 3 devotion already. That means that we can filter that into a red. Not that we really need to, but we want to see what's off the top. We end up playing the Renvelt Hordemaster just because we have another land drop. It's important with Conspicuous Snoop, you generally want to play cards off the top of your deck so that you're card positive with that. It also means that you hit your land drops more, because if the next card is a land, which you can't cast with your Conspicuous Snoop, you draw it into your hand and you can play it next turn. But in this case, I already have the Stomping Grounds here. They don't have any removal. I want to build up my devotion. they don't have anything on the draw, and that's kind of it. Not a lot to see here, really. It just shows you a little bit how the deck is supposed to play. A little bit of an easy win. The next matches are a little bit more back and forth. So, match 3, game 1. One of the faster ones here. Oh, let's see what happens. First thing is, we win the die roll. We always want to be on the play. We end up with double Renvelt, 4 lands, and a Fireblade Charger. Double Renvelt is a great hand. You always want to have at least 2 true drops and a 1-drop. If you're on the draw, you can even go without a 1-drop just because, I mean, if you look at it, we are playing a whole bunch of them. That's 14, 16, 22 of our 34 creatures are 1-drops, so they're very easy to draw into. Turn 2, we're going to put down our Renvelt Hordemaster, and then we can double spell next turn. Our opponent plays Ketria Triumph, looking at the companion. They've got Karuga, which means that they are probably on the Cascade deck, or something else big like that. Now, change of plan because we have drawn a Conspicuous Snoop. We played the Renvelt Hordemaster. They bedazzle our first Renvelt. They die, they give us another trigger. Gives us Foundry Street Denizen, so we cast that off the top so we keep our Cacophony Scamp in hand. Save us some mana. And Foundry Street Denizen in this matchup is going to be better because it's a more aggro card. It likes to see those ETBs to get pumped up. We have a ton of mana, and that lets us, off of Nykthos, activate Battlecry Goblin to give everything haste after dropping it down. When you see that, drop 1 Cacophony Scamp that gives us 4 devotion, so with our 3 last lands, we activate Nykthos, we cast Battlecry Goblin for 2, we activate it for 2 more, and so then we're going to rumble in for more than 12. Game 2. Now, I don't think, because I was a little bit less familiar with the meta before playing this league, that I knew exactly what the game plan was for the opponent, because they were playing Bedeck Bedazzle. Hadn't really clued into Cascade. I did need to mulligan down there quite a bit to 5 cards. Actually, I want to talk about those mulligans quickly. First, the first one, I think I didn't have a good mix of lands. And the second one, I didn't have enough spells, or vice versa. Either way, this one, because my breakouts count, you count your breakouts as 2-drops in this deck. You play 12 actual 2-drops, which are pretty important for your game plan. Your breakouts count as 0.75 of a 2-drop, because if you haven't seen any of them, usually you have a 75 or 80% chance of hitting 1 2-drop. Usually you have a choice of multiple. It's also a little bit better because you have, you know, situational things, like if you need a Legion Loyalist to trample through something, you can use that. Here we go. We're going to get the Renvelt Hordemaster. We always say yes, unless the opponent has something that's going to block them from coming onto the board. And go through. Our opponent just gets a desert into their hand and do the whole Spinewood Armadillo thing. We continue to get more mana. We want another breakout. We're going to get a Hordemaster off of it, and we're going to play our Fireblade Charger. Now, this gives us a lot of damage. They're only at 10, but they get their next mana off the Greater Tanuki, and now I'm kind of sweating because they have 5. That means that they get the Contorious. I don't have any options, and so, because of this Dark Double out, and, you know, that is how the Discover combo works. So, for this match, you look at my sideboard plan, because I didn't really think about what they were having. I didn't actually change anything. I just ran the stock list because the stock list is very quick. Now that I know that they're on that plan, I believe yeah, we're going to keep it absolutely the same. There's nothing that you can really do. You could bring in your Rending Volleys, but they don't hit Planeswalkers. You could bring in Cindervines, because they're casting a lot of things with the Discover, but it's always going to be creatures, and only a couple of Planeswalkers. Instead, what I want to do now is I want to find a hand where, because when Quintorius gets minused, the first Quintorius is going to be at 1, and they only have one object on the battlefield. They won't be able to clone it if it's dead. So, I want to find something where I have a Skirk Prospector so I can trigger a death of a Cacophony Scamp or a Fireblade Charger, which I also have on board at any time. As long as I have those two, I am safe. So, right off the bat, we're on the play. First hand, we have a Skirk Prospector and a Battlecry Goblin, Conspicuous Snoop. That could be a no, but we do have this breakout, which does give us the versatility, like I was talking about, so that we can find the piece that we exactly need right now. So we end up playing it. First thing off is the Skirk Prospector. Then we're going to see if we can go Shields up on the next turn. They're still too far away, so let's go with Conspicuous Snoop and see if we can just get the advantage while we can. And go in. Keep digging off the top with the Renvelt Hordemaster. We're still out of the danger zone, but the Renvelt Hordemaster does give us something special. That's a little bit of insurance if they're playing a board wipe. I can sacrifice almost all of my creatures to the Skirk Prospector if it were going to exile them or something like that. So, right now, I'm in a golden kind of winning position. Breakout on top means I can't cast anything, but with the Battlecry Goblin, I can cast that and kick it to win the game. Now, Battlecry Goblin, I think, is actually a lot. It's like a Bushwhacker, but you get to draw a card. And I say that because with a Goblin Bushwhacker, you cast a spell, and then you get to cast your Bushwhacker for the Surge in Pioneer, and that gives you the haste for your team and a little bit of cost reduction. This is a 2-mana Goblin, right? And you get for 2, and then you can pay the activate ability for 2, which is the same thing as Bushwhacker, and then you attack. When you do, if you have power 6 or greater, that means that you get the 1/1 body as well. So, for 4 mana, you get 2 bodies, which is almost the same as getting a Bushwhacker out, where you're paying 3 or 4 mana, but you're spending 2 cards. In the case of Battlecry Goblin, you're spending more mana. 4 mana, you get 2 bodies, haste, +1/+0 to your team, and 2 bodies for 1 card to cast, which is kind of fantastic if you think about it. It makes it a must deal with threat. So, once I have this, my opponent is out of the game. It's just too fast. It's consistent as a turn 4 deck, and you can imagine, like in the matchup that we had against the red deck before, even if I'm encountering removal, there is still not a lot that my opponent can do to slow it down. It just hits incredibly hard, incredibly quickly. Alright. If I'm recalling correctly, this next game was also against a player who was playing with, Karuga. So immediately I'm clued into the fact now, because I just faced that, getting an idea of the meta, that I'm likely going to be facing another Discover combo. So, if I have a hand which has everything that I want, 2 2-drops, a Skirk Prospector and a Fireblade Charger, as well as 3 mana sources, I'm happy with that. So, I'm going to drop in a Prospector or a Fireblade Charger first. We're going to see what happens. They use Bedeck Bedazzle. I'm not that sad about that because I draw a second one off the top, and Bedeck Bedazzle gives +3/+0 minus +3 -3 till end of turn. So when it dies, it's a 4 -2. So I just dealt 4 damage to them off of their removal spell. For an aggro deck, I mean, they might as well not have bothered. I'm going to put down the Battlecry Goblin because Battlecry Goblin naked here means that on turn 3 we can play a Skirk Prospector or a Fireblade Charger, and then they can pump and rumble in for some extra damage. Instead here, they got ahead with a Beanstalk Giant. Now, that means if they untap next turn and they have their 5th mana, I'm in the danger zone. So instead, I decide to turtle up with the Fireblade Charger, Skirk Prospector on board so that I can deal that direct damage. If they have that mana, then they have to spend at least some of it, you know, dismantling my situation before they can combo off. So what do they go for? Spinewood Armadillo. They get some more lands, and they turtle up. I can play my Renvelt Hordemaster. Now, I start to combo off with the Fireblade Charger just because I want to have some extra mana. Maybe I can put that into the Battlecry Goblin to pump up my board and rumble in, or I dig for more Fireblade Chargers because I have Skirk Prospector and the Renvelt Hordemaster. I sacrifice, I look at the top card of my deck, exile it if it's a Goblin, and I can cast it until end of turn. Chain through a bunch of Fireblade Chargers to deal some more direct damage. But first thing I find is this Foundry Street Denizen. That has a great synergy with Battlecry Goblin, because once they attack, they're going to boost the whole team. Once they attack, they can get a 1/1 Goblin token, which is going to give +1/+0 here, so I opt to sacrifice the Fireblade Charger here for an extra mana, tap those mana, activate the Battlecry Goblin, give my whole team haste, and see if I can attack in now. When I go to attacks, they don't have anything else, and that's kind of all she wrote, because look at this, we got 5, 10, 14 damage before the trigger goes off, so 15 total. And that's already before you consider that I can sack these creatures after combat, as well as this one. So I have 3 cantrips. I can cast another Battlecry Goblin. I can sacrifice that. So I can dig 4 cards down, 5 cards down, see if I can find some more Fireblade Chargers or any other 1-drops that get me another card down, another card down, another card down. It's just incredibly consistent on turn 4. Alright, so game 2, I end up losing. Let's see how that happens. First off, look at this. Usually you wouldn't want to keep this hand because you don't have a 1-drop, but you have 3 2-drops there with a breakout. You have a Nykthos, which is nice, and you have a bunch of good mana. Soken's-On can almost counter the spell later down, especially when you have this much other lands in hand, so I'm not too worried about that. Was this a mistake? Probably. I could have mulliganed here. The deck is fairly consistent. It's well built. It has enough lands. It has enough creatures. And our first draw was kind of a dead draw, so we didn't get a 1-drop. That's too bad. So, on turn 2, we're going to put down our Conspicuous Snoop, just because that lets us see the top, lets us confirm what's going on, and get a Howder and card advantage. They have Leyline Binding because they've realized that removal is a thing that they need to pack. Now for us, because we didn't see the Leyline Binding in the last matchup, I haven't actually changed anything onto my sideboard. I would typically bring in the Max Vandals there, because then you can hit them with a Breakout. If I have Breakout and I have Mass Vandals in my deck, there's a really good chance that I can find them. Downside is that I need to have a creature in my graveyard, and I don't this early, so I just use the Breakout, get my Battlecry Goblin, and really that lack of 1-drops is killing me now because I'm an aggro deck that is 2 mana down that I have unspent on turn 1 and turn 3. And so They end up comboing off with a Greater Tanuki channeled to get their extra mana, so they go off on turn 4 as well. Why do I think Goblins is superior though? Because while I'm building up my board, I can go shields up on turn 4 and I can kill them. So I have some more disruption than their deck has for mine. Leyline Binding is something that I can easily work through. I'm going to see a little bit more evidence of that in the last game. Oh, being on the play, always an advantage for the Goblins deck because we are aggro. We want to hit them fast. We have our Mass Vandal, we have our green sources. We've got 2/2-drops, Mass Vandal kind of being the worst one. But with this hand, I don't think there's anything to object to. So we end up keeping it. Look at our opponent. They mull down one. Skirk Prospector is good because it lets us get that creature in the graveyard. So even if they go for an exile type removal, we can always sack it to our Mass Vandal. Turn 2, Conspicuous Snoop. They Bedeck, Bedazzle, or Snoop. That's okay. What happens next? Well, we get that Copperline Gorge. We play our 2 spells. We rumble in for 2 damage. They opt to gain some life, and they go for the Leyline Binding. This time they're going to take the Battlecry Goblin. That's okay for me. Because I can cast my Masked Vandal now, blow up their Leyline Binding, and give all of my creatures haste, if I want to, and rumble in for massive damage. I do so, I get the token, because everything puts me at 9. Now I could sacrifice them and put my Renvelt Hordemaster down, just to protect myself from anything else that they've got. But if I get another land, I've got the Den of the Bugbear online. They don't, they just Trumpeting Carnosaur, channeled, take out one of my creatures. They don't know that I have this in hand, so the game is all wrapped up. And that is 8 lethal damage exactly. I could dig deeper. 4 more Fireblade Chargers and Cacophony Scamps. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sack triggers, plus the one that I have there. I mean, this is easily a turn 5, where, you know, in spite of them getting 2 pieces of removal and 1 life gain spell, I could have done another 10 damage and closed out the game. And it just, they can't get away from me fast enough. Final game, you got a little bit of a harder matchup. This time, I think we are up against Phoenix, which is a difficult matchup. I'm going to, I really wish they let you restart the replay. Alright. So, missed the opening hand. First opening hand, I don't think I had enough 2-drops, so I opted to go another mulligan. I didn't have enough lands. Yeah, you don't want to keep that on 1 land. So, going with the Skirk Prospector, still a bad hand to keep, but we have the Soakins on, so it's worth it. They have a Fiery Impulse, get the removal, we can attack in. They're on their mana, they start shocking stuff in. My Way of Robbery, I haven't actually seen this before at this point, so take a look. Seems good. Red card draw, not something that I'd play in here because it would decrease my Goblin density. Get a Battlecry Goblin off the top. I don't want to cast it without protection. Ended up getting Torch the Tower on there. They keep up on the card draw. They have a lot of cards in hand. They got their Phoenix down. And they decide to attack in. Now, if I hadn't had that tap land there, I might have been able to squeeze out some extra damage. Get an extra token off the Battlecry Goblin. A little bit of a misplay in my sequencing for the lands. I should bring the Copper Line earlier if I had the chance. They discard the Lightning Axe get another Phoenix out with their 2 Stubborn Denials. It's smart on their part because I have so few skills. It lets them cast enough things that they get their 2 Demi-Liches. And at this point, even with the Snoop, I get some card advantage back. They have got too much for me to deal with because they can use removal in their graveyard to blow up my Snoop. So, can I get around the Demi-Liches? Yeah, I feel like the Demi-Liches are a little bit too slow. So, have a look at the other game. Alright, well, MTGO seems to have glitched out there. I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong, or it's doing something wrong. But it's been a pleasure speaking with everybody today. It was kind of a little bit of a heartbreaker that I didn't end up getting the clean 5-0. I still got my 5 treasure chests. Opened it up, got a bit of loot. Nothing very good. Still, nothing to be disappointed about. I'm gonna keep on posting these as a little bit of thinking. About, yeah, just how the deck plays, how everything goes, and a little bit of information for more people. If you got any questions or comments about how the deck plays, please put them below. Sure to read all of them and see what everybody thinks. This deck is viable. It's very strong. It can play well in the current meta. It's just that, you know, people aren't willing to take the risk to commit to such a crazy strategy. Goblins decks usually go a little bit bigger, where you're playing the Rakdos Goblins, but if you have Conspicuous Snoop, you have all of these fantastic 1-drops, then you can really just chain through your deck with Skirk Prospector, Runvelt, Hordemaster, and Conspicuous Snoop so fast that you deal all of the damage from the death triggers off Fireblade, Charger, and Cacophony Scamp. Barring that, you know, you're pumping your Foundry Street Denizens if they're on board, you have your Legion Loyalists to grant them trample, or you can get massive amounts of mana to pour in with your Battlecry Goblin with the Nykthos. I mean, it's just got such good legs. On top of that, Mass Vandal working with all of your goblins. This is really an underplayed card. Absolute powerhouse if you've ever played it against a Fable of the Mirror here. It's absolutely a stellar answer. In terms of the rest of the sideboard, I got Gruul Charms here against the Phoenix decks, just for the 3 damage to each creature with flying, stuff like that. We've got some Rending Volleys, but I don't know how useful that is now that you don't really see Greasefang anymore. Pick Your Poison deals easily with your vampires and is just a very good option for anything else. And of course, for the control and combo kind of decks, so you have your Cindervines and 1 copy of Clothis. Sometimes I do a Chandra Death to Kill as well, just because they give you everything that you want. A little bit of card advantage. In this case, I like the life gain with Clothis, but Chandra gives you card advantage, gives you mana, really just helps out your curve as a nice topper. The nice thing about Clothis, though, is that you can put them into your hand off of Breakout as well. It's not as good as getting one of your 2-drops onto the board, but in a pinch, can really save you in a lot of situations. I hope you guys enjoyed. Yeah, like and comment below, all that good stuff, and I'll see you on the flip side.